Eigo από την Eigo. Και τώρα δίνω το λόγο στο Τζιμ που μάλλον συμφωνεί αρκετά μαζί μου.
The film has been very long. And they have me here from New York. They asked me to make a presentation. It only is 8 minutes. It maybe is 8 minutes too long, but I'm here. And here's the presentation. My background is in the theater. Knowing that, perhaps you can understand what a thrill it is for me, after 40 years of studying Greek drama, for me to be in Greece, the source of all Western theater for the very first time. Yesterday at the Theater of Dionysus, as I stood at the gate just beyond the stage and looked out upon the vast absent audience, I was struck once more by the immensity of the space, but even more by its terrific intimacy, and I remembered once again why I fell in love with the theater to begin with. Theater is the most personal of the arts. It's the art of the flesh, the art of the living, breathing body, but at the same time, theater is the most public of arts. It is the one that's at its greatest in the undying works of an Aeschylus or a Sophocles, is an art of the people. In that sense, my time in ACT UP was for me, because of my background, very much a work of theater. ACT UP came about in 1987, at a time when young gay men in my city, New York, were dying of a devastating and devious disease at a rate faster than people had died in any epidemic that America had ever seen. Dying at a rate even faster than in our bloodiest war, the Civil War. ACT UP came about when enough gay men of New York City and so many of our lesbian and straight sisters and a few other friends and allies came to see that there was a political dimension to the AIDS crisis, that gay men were being allowed to die because our elected officials did not see our lives as worthy of being saved. At our darkest hour, when it seemed that over the next few years, all of us might well die unless current conditions changed radically, we made the decision to take a more direct control over those public institutions and those private companies that feed off the public, institutions that were failing to deliver anything like adequate treatment to my afflicted community. We could do that because we were of the community. We knew what treatments were needed more intimately, more directly than those public agencies that should have been getting us effective treatments. And after a short but very intense period of study and strategizing, we even knew better than they did how to design the research that just might get us those treatments before we all died off. Of course, to do this, we had to be smart, and collectively, we were. But at least as important, we had to find the courage to take our bodies, many of them severely weakened by the same disease we were fighting to end, and put them on the line, risking arrest and prison time in smart, well-planned, non-violent acts of civil disobedience done in support of a very particular demand that targeted a public or a private entity that had the power to give us what we wanted. In a breathlessly short period of time, on several different fronts, ACT UP got what it wanted. In the movie How to Survive a Plague, which focuses mostly on ACT UP's actions done with respect to AIDS drugs, you understandably do not see most of our other campaigns on AIDS and housing, AIDS and women, AIDS and people of color, AIDS and youth, AIDS and drug users, AIDS and immigrants. The list goes on and on. In the film, you see nothing of ACT UP's spectacularly successful needle exchange program, but I want you to know that there was one. Because such things can't be shown on a film, you might also go away from the screening without knowing that ACT UP could do what it did because we were self-financed through community donations, through a very ACT UP t-shirt franchise, through the occasional benefit fundraiser, and through the auctions of donated artworks. We were paid by no one, so we could say and do whatever we felt had to be done. You also might walk away from this film without knowing how structured ACT UP was. Before ACT UP was a month old, an organic system of 5 committees emerged. Each of these committees sent a representative to an overall coordinating committee. The genius of this system, until it broke down, was that while all the power to make final decisions remained to the general membership of ACT UP, all the real work got done in smaller groups, in the committees, subcommittees, and series of special task forces that rose and fell as the organization and the epidemic evolved. And yet the basic unit of ACT UP was the affinity group, a small group of people that during ACT UP's big demonstrations chose to risk arrest together or to support those that were risking arrest. The mutual support system of the affinity group has been important throughout the long, noble history of nonviolent civil disobedience in the United States. But it was even more important in ACT UP, because beyond all the moral support that every human being requires in a typical arrest situation, so many of us were sick, and so many of us would require continued medication while in jail. I always thought of ACT UP in general as one giant affinity group. We succeeded for long as we did because we dared to care for each other when no one else would. We were united in anger, as the slogan went, but we were also united in love. And why not? We were where we were because we had dared to love in the first place. As imperfect as ACT UP New York was, in its first years of existence, it was for many of us who took part in those sometimes very bruising meetings and public demonstrations, the least imperfect form of direct democracy that we had ever had the privilege to take part in. Now this audience, rooted in the very soil that nurtured the first Western democracy, hardly needs a visitor from that flawed latter-day democracy, the United States, to give you a lecture about it, so I won't even try. But I will take the occasion to say how deeply happy I am that the organization Athens Pride invited me to meet you. The men of Greece who love men, and the women of Greece who love women, are a people who, even today, living in the much advertised cradle of Western civilization, where there is so much enduring evidence that those of us who love our own kind have always been a vibrant and necessary thread in the fabric of community, are denied basic recognition and basic protection. I hardly need to remind you that today in Greece, there are those who stand up and point to others among you and say, oh, but those people are not real Greek people. The long-standing discrimination that the gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people of Greece have undergone make you the ideal people to speak the truth against such voices of hatred. Only the most recent eruption of the same hatred that convulsed all of Europe and much of the rest of the world nearly 80 years ago. True democracy, ruled by the people, is only democracy when the people really get to rule, and will only achieve its least imperfect form when the people is every last one of us. Over the last few days, as I have had the opportunity to meet so many of you, I have been struck over and over by your strength, by your humor, by your resourcefulness, and yes, by your love. So I have every hope and every expectation that all of you in this room and all of your friends and allies and loved ones beyond it will survive the current very difficult times, just as my colleagues and I survived ours, and will live and will thrive. The health of democracy today in the world depends on it. Thank you.